My name is Jonas, and I am the founder of Pento. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do in just a second. So as Nicolaj said, I am going to take a more practical approach to this. So now you've seen from Jakob what you should aspire to. I have a few points on what you should probably start out with instead. So just... Uh-oh. Yeah, I'm going to stand over here. A bit about me. This is me and my co-founder, and actually we have been co-founding 3 startups in the last 6 years. One of them is still around. We're not like active part of the company anymore. And the other one was a failure. Right now we're working on a company called Pento, which I'm about to tell you a bit more about. So the first startup was started almost 6 years ago while we were in college. So this is me studying a BA in communication, meeting up with this computer science geek over coffee. He is having this part-time job where he's packing cheese during the night, and I am selling insurance over the phone. And we decided that couldn't it be cool if we built something that could make money while we were sleeping, so we didn't have to like actually work at these horrible places. So long story short, we started a do-it-yourself ticketing company. So basically you could go online, set up an event and sell tickets. So this got pretty popular at especially high schools, because in Denmark, as you probably know, most of you, you are allowed to throw these like insane parties when you're 16, and you can drink all night. So that's what most high schools still do. And at that point, most of them were selling paper tickets in the canteen. So we fixed that for them and let them like scan tickets with their smartphones. That was at the peak of QR codes. So that went really well. We did that, finished college on the side, and got a bit more ambitious about what we wanted to do. We could see that this type of company was pretty hard to scale, because in other countries, just like in like the local neighbor countries, Sweden, Germany, London, UK, we already had like 10, 20 competitors who were doing the exact same thing. So we partnered up with some other students who wanted to take over and like do the day-to-day stuff. And then we moved on and did a spin-off, which was Hivespeed, which was our second startup. So right out of college, we took what we have learned from Green Ticket, where this was like the first time everything. So this was first time like everything. Took what we've learned and knew that there was probably something going on at like huge college campuses, because we had like a lot of student organizations using the product. So we moved into that space and built a product that was supposed to be sort of like event discovery for students at large campuses. So that's what it started out with. We ended up getting pretty good traction at the 3 largest universities in Denmark. Then we moved on to Sweden, and it did really well there as well. And then we, as I said, had probably at that point very naive ambitions for ourselves. So we wanted to get to the US because you know, the college market in the US is obviously a lot better and a lot bigger than it is in Europe. So we were young and naive and said, yeah, let's go to the US. So we booked flight tickets 2 weeks and talked to pretty much all the investors that we could talk to, and got a sense of how it all worked, got back. And then, long story short, we ended up in an accelerator called 500 Startups, which is based in Mountain View in the Valley. And we raised money from them, moved to Mountain View, spent almost a year there, fucked up a ton, pretty much due to what I'm about to talk about. So not being focused on the right metrics, trying to scale before you have product market fit and stuff like that. So that's where a lot of my learnings come from. So today, we've been on this for 1 year and 6 months. We're building what we call the People OS for smart companies. So we help companies connect the employees to the administrators within a company in terms of payroll, HR, and insurance. So usually, like old traditional products in this space are built mainly for the manager, although most of the data and most of like the information you need in those products are coming from the employees. So we're trying to make it more of an OS where employees have their own products connected to the products that the admins are using. This is looking something like this, just to give you a sense of what it is that we're selling. And so far, as Nicolaj mentioned, we're a team of 8. We have a little over 200 paying customers, and we started out building just a payroll product because we knew that was going to be like the core. And now we're adding HR tools that are especially like interesting for more like upmarket customers. So in like companies with like 30 to 100 and 150 employees. All right, so a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. So I saw Jakob's slides before I was here, so I tried to adjust it so I'm not like saying all the same stuff. These are like the main points. Why are metrics important? Then I'm going to talk about a concept called one metric that matters. Then I'm going to talk about growth metrics, and last one, metrics we're using at Pento. So first of all, and this is maybe the obvious one after all today, why are metrics important? Obviously, the image that Jakob had in his presentation with like the blind person trying to walk around, that's probably like the best image you can put on that. So whenever you're starting out a new product, a new startup, you're probably super excited about the thing that you're building, and that's what's taken up most of your time and most of your interest. And I would say, from my perspective, that is okay in the beginning. That's how it should be, because that's the foundation for dealing with metrics after all later. Today I'm going to talk about 2 types of metrics. I'm going to talk about mostly the growth metrics, but also the product metrics, which I think is also super important at this stage, at least. So about the one metric that matters. So this is a concept that I was presented to for the first time doing 500 startups. And for those of you who don't know 500 startups, this is an accelerator that you apply to, and you need to have some like decent growth, at least some traction to show. And then they take you into this 4 months program where everything is about growth. It's about distribution. It's about finding the channels that are working for you in order to get more users, more customers, and so forth. One of their main points is that at this stage where most of the companies that are going through that program are at, they have a ton of options when it comes to a metric. You can look at revenue metrics, you can look at usage metrics, you can look at acquisition metrics, you can look at like a ton of different metrics. And what they were experiencing was that a lot of startups had a hard time figuring out like, what should I focus on? So they all built these like huge, beautiful dashboards with like 30 different metrics on it, and then they just like ended up being more confused than before they started. So this concept is really about find one metric that is going to help you get to the next stage. And how am I going to find that metric? So first and foremost, this should be a metric that is the most important growth driver. So to my point before, this should be something that I'm moving you towards the next step. Whether the next step is getting your first customer, whether the next step is raising funding or whatever. That's what it should be about. The key is focus. So to my point about the dashboard with like 30 different metrics, you should be really focused on finding out what is that key metric that you should try to improve. This will also help you define success, which is not obviously one of the things that a lot of early stage startups are struggling to do, because you ask them like, what are you trying to do? And they're just like, well, survive, first of all, and then probably make some money along the way. But this forces you to like define, what are we actually trying to achieve? Are we a consumer company who's like trying to improve the number of people who are using our product every day, or are we a SaaS company where revenue is like our main focus? And as with other goals and metrics, these should obviously be measurable, actionable, and improvable. So it doesn't make sense to have a metric that you can't affect in any way. It should be something that you can actually do something about. Then I have a few examples of what good and bad examples of one metric that matters could be. And that's what Nicolaj was talking briefly about, is that you can have what we call vanity metrics, which is the kind of metrics that sounds super good when you're telling your friends about how awesome you're doing at your startup. And then we have the growth metrics, which are the metrics that are actually important for whether like you're trying to chase down investors or actually like getting customers on board. So yeah, vanity metrics it's pretty much obvious that like page views and downloads, as Nicolaj said, and registered users can be in some cases a good sign. But if you can't convert all of these like activities to actual like real metrics like revenue or monthly active users, they don't matter at all. And side note, most investors will see this. So if you try to like bullshit them with like, see how many page views we had in the last month, most of them will like look right through you and probably wait until you leave again. Yes, so the second question is, okay, so now I have like tried to focus on just one metric, and am I not allowed to like have other metrics that I can look at? And obviously it will be hard to just put up a dashboard and say, okay, revenue is our one metric that matters, let's just improve that number. That's pretty hard in itself. So obviously there will be like other metrics that are related to your one metric that matter. But you got to make sure that it's not like, okay, so we want revenue to grow, but we also want more downloads, but we also want to satisfy these types of people over here or whatever. You got to make sure that it all works together. Yeah?
What was your first one metric to move them all at Pento?
That's my next slide. No, not my next slide, but it will be there. Yeah, so some of the metrics that you might want to have as like your a subset of metrics that are obviously driving the one metric that matters is some of the metrics that we've already talked about today. Obviously, customer acquisition cost. I'm going to talk a little bit about, at least from my point of view, when you should care about customer acquisition cost, because if you do it too early, it can also damage like the whole product development. Then we have payback time, and that's actually an alternative to LTV, and I guess that was Jakob's point as well. I'll talk more about that and churn as well. So about the customer acquisition cost, from my perspective, you shouldn't care too much about this in the beginning. But if you are trying to raise money from an investor, if you are a team of like rock stars who are like, I don't know, previous Facebook, Google, or whatever engineers, you can probably raise money anyway. But if you show up to an investor meeting and say, we haven't spent a dime on marketing, and you feel good about it, then you'll probably realize that that is the wrong answer, because that tells you that you have no idea how you got those customers, basically. And you want to scale the number of customers, so you better go figure out like how you're going to do that. And then the last thing is a lot of startups, and we did this ourselves at Hivebeat, you end up trying to find one customer acquisition cost, and it's good to have when you're longer like down the road. But in the beginning, when you're trying to figure out what channels are working, are the Facebook ads better than the AdWords, than what we invest in content marketing or emails or whatever, you got to make sure that you divide them. So you know what is the customer acquisition cost for Facebook, what is it for AdWords, so you don't end up in this like mix of, yeah, our customer acquisition cost is kind of this number, but we don't know why. So this is pretty important. Then about the payback time. Like the easy way to go about this is obviously say, okay, it's pretty obvious that your lifetime value should be more than the customer acquisition cost. But in most cases, startups have absolutely no idea about their lifetime value. Like they have no idea. They don't know if the customers are gonna stick around for 2 years or for 5 years or for 6 months. That makes it a bit of a vanity metric in order to like calculate what can we pay for these customers. So what I recommend you do instead is look at payback period. So how long are you gonna need these customers to stay in order to get back the money that you invested in them? Because then you can look at, okay, how much am I allowed to pay for a customer? And if you have done your like dividing channels correctly, you will know that, okay, we need to shut down Facebook ads because that is too expensive for how long our customers are sticking around. I know the standard in SaaS is that you should aim for 12 to 18 months payback time. But as Jakob also pointed out, like obviously the faster you can get it back, the better. Yeah. The last one is churn, and we've talked about this already. But one of my learnings is that in the beginning you are so much more excited about new companies than you are about existing ones, because you feel like existing ones. I'll get back to you. Existing ones are done deals, so you should focus on the new ones because that's what's creating growth. But one of the best things we've done at Pento is actually hire what we call a customer success manager. She was the hire number 5, I guess, and she's been, I believe, the main reason that our churn is not more than it is, because she's very aware of when are our customers like super happy and when are they like kind of nah, and when are they hating us. And having someone focus on that is super, super important, because it tells you a lot about like the health of your business. Yeah, and it's pretty obvious that like customer acquisition cost and payback time are quite useless if you're churning all the customers anyway. Okay, so well, you have a question. I almost got.
Regarding the payback time, from what point in time do you measure that? Is it from the point in time where the customers start paying, or is it from when you approach them in the beginning?
From they start paying. So.
They start paying.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because like in the beginning you might talk to people for whatever 6 months before they sign up. Yeah. So yeah, I would say once they start paying, you know how long the payback time will be over time. And the good thing about payback time is that you can use historic data. So you don't have to like you don't have to let's say you've been on this for a year and you have had a customer for 8 months. Like then you know that that customer shows you that your payback time is at least like 8 months. All right, I need some water. Yes.
I know you were not using it, and maybe Jakob can answer, but how do you measure the lifetime value if you've only been in the market for 1.5 years? So if you're having a customer, let's say 1 month, and you have to show the lifetime value, and you're not knowing how long they're actually staying, do you use the churn rate as an indicator, or how?
Well, yeah, you can do that. My point is that to your point, like you have no idea. Obviously, like if you're building a product, let's say for us payroll, you know that if people are buying your payroll product, they might stick around for a long time because it's not something that they're like switching every month. If you're selling some sort of marketing automation tool, there are a ton of them and they might switch to another provider next month. Then it will be hard to calculate an LTV, I would say. And yeah.
To answer that, I mean, the longer you've known a bunch of customers, the better the opportunity to estimate the lifetime value. Because if you look at the cohorts from customers coming in January, for instance, and their propensity to stay on, it usually is a smooth, especially for instance, take the case of people, they had a fast drop off initially, and then it just smoothens up over time. So you can extrapolate that, and that gives you an idea on your expected value.
So in your case, you've only been in the market for 4 years. How could you measure your lifetime value?
If we do it only by churn, it would be, as I mentioned before, we would have an expected lifetime value of 35 years or something like that, which nobody believes it anyway. So for us, given that we are catering for huge enterprises, it doesn't really make sense. So the way that we actually come up with a decent churn metric or lifetime value is asking similar customers or similar companies like ours selling to similar customers and asking how long time do they usually stay on for software. And we know they're going to stay on for 24 years. When I tell that to investors, they think I'm lying anyway. So we are estimating 6 years, although I honestly believe it's going to be a lot more. But no matter how you do it, unless you actually live with the customer for that long, it's going to be with a lot of uncertainty. But I would say cohorts and extrapolation is a good measurement.
Yeah, and I guess my point is here that you shouldn't really care too much about this in the beginning, and that's what I'm trying to say up here. Like, you should be so close to your customers that you know for sure when they will churn and you know why they're churning. You obviously can't like keep doing that when you grow, but in the beginning this should be one of your main priorities, I would say. All right, so about the metrics we use at Pento. This is to answer your question. Now I forgot where we were. The one metric that matters, what I probably didn't say, which is actually a pretty important point, is that obviously you don't need to have the same one metric that matters like during the whole lifetime of a company. And that's to Nicolaj's point and to Jakob's as well. Like, you, in the beginning, you're trying to get to the step that is your first customer, and then maybe like the 10 next customers, and then maybe like raising money, and the metrics that you should be looking at that stage are super different than the ones Templafy are looking at. So in the beginning, when we were just getting started, what we were looking at was the number of customers, because we knew that if we wanted to spend a whole lot of years on this, we wanted to make sure that there was actually someone who's going to buy it. And we knew that before we had any customers, we couldn't test anything anyway. It would just be me and Emil in some office doing assumptions. So the first 8 months, it was like trying to gather a pool of companies who were willing to risk the payroll and start using Pento. Once we had that like critical mass of companies, I guess it was around like 50 or so, we started caring more about the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, which is more about how what is the exact expression? How I can't remember it, but exactly, yeah. So how what was the word again? How likely, that was the word I was looking for. How likely are you to recommend this product to a friend or a colleague? And this sounds like, to me at least, in the beginning, it sounded like something you would ask in like some sort of a broad survey from some like corporate whatever company sending out to their customers. But this is actually ended up being one of the most, and especially in that period, the most important metric to us, because you can pretty fast or pretty quickly see how powerful it is that you have a good NPS score and how bad it looks for you if the NPS score is bad. So that was our main focus for 8 to 16 months. Right now our main focus is revenue, but also still NPS, but mostly revenue. So in the period that we were focusing on number of customers, as I said, the most important problem for us at that time was, are anyone willing to actually pay money for this product? Are they willing to switch from whatever they're using and start using Pento instead? This was obviously used for testing and getting feedback from those customers and making sure that we were building the right features in the beginning. Then we made a mistake, and actually, to my own point about being focused, we ended up kind of having, not explicitly, and not something we were actively talking about, like having two different goals, but we ended up having two OMTMs at the same time. So what we believed about this market is that you go out to bookkeepers and accountants and you get them to love your product so that they will refer it to all of their customers. And at the same time, we were building a product for the small companies who were like the companies who actually signed up and paid us. And that made, it took us a long time to realize that that had a really bad impact on our product priorities, because we were actually trying to convince bookkeepers to join us. So we're building all like the features that they were requesting, while the folks over here who were actually making us money, we had like no focus on them at all. So we actually ended up with like kind of two OMTMs. We were trying to get more bookkeepers to use the product while also getting more companies to use the product, and we didn't realize that those were actually two very different types of customers. Then we moved on to NPS, and that was, as I said, when we were having enough customers to like try and get to a point where we should start building the foundation for actually like trying to scale the number of customers. We were aiming for 75, which is actually pretty high. Usually you say you should be in somewhere between 50 and 80, and if you're very close to 80, you're doing a really good job. Right now our NPS is at 72, I guess. So we're still trying to do it better, but it's going in the right direction. My point here is that once you start caring about your NPS, the whole mindset on your customers are starting to switch from customers being these like transactions where you need to sell them a product, and once they sign up, they're like, oh, now they're locked in, and now we don't need to care about them anymore. To a mindset where you understand that if your customers are happy, they will actually help you sell your product. And it was something, it took a long time for us, because we were in the first mindset thinking that, okay, once we have the customer, we don't need to, like, they'll do this on their own, like the onboarding is nice and they can like use the product and we'll just make money on them. But then we realized that if we actually try to track how much they like the product or don't like the product, we'll realize that if we get to a point where people really like the product, they will tell all their friends about it. And I guess you all know like about that when you're buying something and you're just like super excited about it, there's a big chance you'll tell someone else. So what we did was that we started reaching out to the customers who had a high NPS score. And in the beginning, it felt kind of weird, but along the way, we just started asking for referrals. So we just asked them, okay, so it seems like you're really happy using Pento. Like, why don't you tell us about 5 of your friends who could potentially use Pento as well? And you could see that the higher NPS, the more they were willing to actually help you get out in the market. Also, and this is a very, very important point, and one of the main reasons why we failed with HiveBeat was that being very aware of your NPS will eliminate the risk of premature scaling, which means that in our case, when we got to the Valley and into 500 startups, they were all like yelling at us, grow, 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 and the money that they invested in us were like, throw them at ads, throw them at like whatever that can make you grow. But at that point, we had no idea what we were like trying to do, and the college market was super different than it was in Europe, and we ended up spending a lot of money on nothing, pretty much, because we were trying to grow before we had a product that was ready to grow. So a good NPS score will help you figure this out.
Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you actually track the revenue generated by NPS? Are you tracking the return on growth coming from that?
No, actually not. That is, I've never heard that before, actually. But yeah, good point. I guess there's a correlation, a relation. But yeah, I don't know, to be honest. We could just see that when we look at the number of signups we're getting and we're tracking where the signups are coming from, the higher the NPS, the more signups we're getting out of the blue. Yeah.
I also have a question.
Yeah.
If you have time for
Sure,
it.
sure.
Yeah, all right. How did you figure out at a low practical level what was the most determining factors for a high NPS for your customers?
Yeah, good question. Talking to them.
Like on the phone?
Yeah, so that's where Michelle, our fifth hire, has been very important. Because if we didn't hire a customer success manager, I wouldn't have taken the time to call our existing customers because I would have been like chasing new customers all the time. But she was calling them and actually like just being generally like curious. Are you in love with this product, or is it like kind of a commodity? You just need to run payroll. And we actually realized that. And it's not like, it's kind of a humble brag, but a lot of the people were like really in love with the product. And like people just sitting in an office building software and dealing with bugs all the time, you don't realize that that's the case. So one thing is that it obviously there's a lot of like positive energy and like knowing that your customers love the product, but it's also making sure that you don't want to fuck those customers up. Like you want to make sure that they continue to love the product. So to your question, yeah, it was basically calling them up saying, hi, I'm from Pento. Do you have 5 minutes to talk about your experience with Pento? And then they would like, some of them would be like, yeah, I like it. That's a good product. And some of those conversations lasted for like 20 to 30 minutes because they were like, yeah, I like this so much. It could be nice if you did this and this and that. I'm pretty sure those are the people who are recommending Pento to other people they know. All right, so now to definitely the most boring one metric that matter, which is revenue. This is like the phase that we're moving into now. So now we spend a lot of time making sure that our NPS is high, that people like using our product, that they on their own want to refer Pento to other customers. And now we're moving into a phase where both like business-wide, but also like fundraising-wise, we're getting to a point where now we can't just tell investors that, oh yeah, great product and vision and stuff like that. When you're a SaaS company, revenue will probably be your most important metric at some point. This is obviously to prove the business case. This is a phase where we are a lot more focused on the growth metrics that I was mentioning before, the customer acquisition cost, the payback time, and stuff like that. Honestly, until that point, we didn't really care that much about them. It was more of like getting a sense of how this thing works and getting a sense of whether we should pay $10 or $20 to get someone to click on our ad at AdWords. Because we weren't ready to scale anyway, so it didn't make sense to like try and focus too much on that. Right now, our focus is on revenue, and a part of that is average revenue per user. In our case, we have a business model where the more employees you have in a company, the more expensive it is to use Pento. So in the beginning, if you can remember, the metric that we were caring about was the number of companies, and it was that for a long time. But then you realize that the number of companies is a very vague metric if those companies are only existing of 1 and 2 employees, especially if like your revenue is coming from how many employees there are in the company. So right now we're focusing a lot more on how big is the company, how much potential revenue is there in this company, and we're starting to build the features that allow us to target bigger clients where we make a lot more money than we do on small companies. Yes. Then I wanted to touch upon this just briefly because this is something I think most early stage startups don't focus on at all, or think is kind of like not necessary. That is, if you have investors, sending them a monthly update. And sometimes that is a horrible experience because you need to tell them that shit just hit the fan and we didn't like improve our metrics more than like whatever 2% this month. But it keeps you honest and it will help you long term because it holds you accountable to those metrics. So I've seen a lot of founders and especially myself in the past being, you know, super excited about getting on the front page of whatever newspaper or tech magazine or something like that, and that keeps you excited for a long time until you then meet with your investor and they're like, okay, so how many new customers did you get in like the last whatever 2 months? And then you're in a very bad position because they don't care about your TechCrunch article or whatever. So it's a very, very good thing to do, and it keeps you honest and it keeps you aware that you need to actually improve these metrics over time. Also, because a lot of startups are not doing this, it makes you stand out. So if an investor has invested in a lot of startups, they will notice that you know your metrics and that you're caring about this shit. All right, so the last thing I wanted to touch was a product experience, and that is where we're using metrics in a more like product-focused way. And we're doing that to make better decisions and create feedback loops. So make sure that we are building the right stuff and making sure that we test before we build. So I'm sure you're all aware of the whole like lean startup framework. So I have a few examples, or actually I only have 2, but the first one is a maternity leave feature. So we were targeting very, very small companies in the beginning because that's what our product could do. At the beginning, we could basically just run payroll for a 3-person company. We could do it in a pretty easy way, but that was what the product could do. And then we moved up market and started seeing a lot of problems in like 30, 40, 50 people companies. And obviously wanted those companies as well because the revenue we could get from those companies was a lot higher. So we ended up talking to a pretty cool company here in Copenhagen who was super excited about using Pento, but all they needed was this like ability to like they had this employee who's going on maternity leave, and they needed some way to like make sure that was reflected in the payroll. And we were super excited to get those on the board. So we did, you know, the mistake that you often do. You throw everything else out the window, and then you start building that feature. So it ended up taking 3 weeks because it was super complicated, a lot more complicated than we thought. And now we have a feature that are only being used by 1 user, and no one else had used that feature in the last 5 months. We could have prevented this if we had done what we did in example 2. We wanted to test whether our customers wanted to buy insurance for their employees. So when you sign up on Pento, you are mostly doing this because you want to run payroll for these employees. And if you want to run payroll, you have employees who need to get insured. And getting an insurance for a small company in Denmark can be kind of a headache. You need to do a lot of work. And the data that the insurance companies need in order to give you a quote on the insurance is the exact same data that we have because we're running payroll for you. So we wanted to test, would our customers be willing to add an insurance, a one-click insurance, to their employees right in Pento when they were using the product anyway. And we wanted to make sure that we're not making the maternity mistake, which we're calling it right now. We told ourselves we want to do this in 1 week, and all we're doing is we're building front end. We're not building anything back end. So we just built what was supposed to be how the thing should look in the product, and we released it, and we set up tracking for how many people clicked the button that said add insurance. And we ended up in 2 weeks with 43% of our customers actually clicking that button. And then you know that it's not a maternity feature. And then you know that you should probably consider building that at some point. Yeah, that was actually my last slide. Thank you.
So should we say 2 questions and whatever, and then we can chat afterwards, and then I have a very brief outro, just to avoid, being too late. So a few questions to Jonas while Alice is setting up the other computer. Another question there?
Yes?
Can you describe what methods or tools you use to get your NPS score?
Yep, good question. I should probably mention some of the tools. We use a tool called Hotjar, which allows us to add this very small box to wherever in the app that we want it to. We can also customize it. So what we're doing is, if you've run payroll 3 months in a row, we show you this box, and then we ask you how likely are you to recommend Pento to a friend or a colleague. And they have from 0 to 10, and then they can add a comment as well. And then we have added everyone on the team on that email we get from Hotjar. Every time a user submits an NPS score, so everyone on the team gets a reminder every time telling them how good are we doing, or how well are we doing. Yeah, so Hotjar, I think they have a free version. I think so. Yeah.
How did your customer react when they actually didn't get insurance?
Yeah, good question. So what we did was that we're using Intercom, which is a chat, a live chat on the website, and then we had our developer do it in a way that when you click the button, it would open up a message saying, "Oh, sorry, we can't do this yet. Would you add a comment, or how excited are you about this feature?" And then we had customers getting back to us that would be pretty cool because I hate insurance companies or whatever. Yeah, so we told them in a nice way that, "I'm sorry, we can't do this yet." Yeah.
So thanks a lot, Jonas, for sharing the data.